In today's episode, we're going to look at making a stock to go on to the back of our carbine. Stay tuned. So one of the things about the Cobra is it has this cocking handle on the back in a position that we would perhaps consider putting a stock onto it. Now, given sufficient tools, you could do amazing things. A few years ago, I'm aware of one YouTube contributor who decided to create a tactical carbine, and what he did was cut off most of this cocking lever, and he added an AK folding stock, and he did a very clever little bit of gubbins on there to attach the two together. And that was clever, but the problem is this was a chap who had a machine shop and knew what he was doing inside of it. What I'm trying to do is create something that you can do yourself using inexpensive materials and also nothing more sophisticated than ordinary household tools. So we're going to go a little bit lower tech. And so instead of actually trying to remove the cocking lever in any way, we're going to add to it. What we're going to need material-wise are just a few simple components. To begin with, we have a steel tube. Now this is brushed steel. It's 1 inch in diameter, and it's got an external diameter of around about 26 mil, around about 24 mil on the inside. This was a piece of curtain rod. So these are cheaply available in a number of DIY stores. A simple brushed steel curtain rod, and you'll notice here I've got a wooden plug in it, and actually this wooden plug goes in, it's actually halfway in, and this was a piece of dried kindling which I'd carved down to more or less the right size, and then using a wooden maul I managed to actually knock it in until we're about 4 inches. It's about halfway. This is 8 inches long, and so this is halfway in. I need to trim off the end here. And then 2 centimeters in, or about 2 centimeters, that's about however many fractions of an inch, we're going to drill a hole. We're going to drill, you'll forgive me, I'm going to go metric here for you a moment, because we're going to be using a M6 or 6 millimeter bolt with a wing nut, and we're going to drill 2 centimeters in a hole that goes all the way through, that's going to be 6 mil. We're also going to be fitting it onto the back of this, because this will fit on here nicely and actually creates a nice section. The hole that we're going to drill will have a corresponding hole drilled into the actual cocking lever, so that when we put this on, we'll be able to tighten it up using nothing more sophisticated than this simple wing nut and bolt. Before I do all of that, I'm going to have to saw this end off, and the reason why we want the wooden plug in here is because we're going to screw into it. We're also going to make this black as well, and for that we're going to be using some oversized heat shrink tube, and also for the buttstock itself we're going to use this little accessory. Now this is made for shotguns, and basically if I unscrew the plate a little bit, I'll show you how it works. This has a bolt with a screw fitting on the back, and if I just unscrew that a little bit, this plate screws onto the buttstock of your shotgun. This has sort of bumpy bits, and this has a bit of a negative, and then you can actually position it where you want it to be, tighten it down, and this rather comfortable surface becomes the part that goes on your shoulder. Now I'm going to paint this surface black because I think that will look better. Pop that screw out. And what we'll eventually do is put a screw through this hole. Once that's flattened off, and that'll actually screw onto there to give us something like that, which when it's on the cocking lever and screwed into place, will give us a good fit for our shoulder. Now, I will point out, these come in a variety of different forms. There's a number of different ones made. This one I like for two reasons. First of all, this metal plate makes this really rigid, so although that's a soft rubber there, it's actually quite firm. It's not going to deform. And also it drills through the center, because I want that to attach this to the center of my stock, because once everything is assembled, it'll look something like that. Now, this particular tactical carbine is going to be having a magazine put on it. And that's important. And in fact, this gives me about the same distance. If you see here, if I shoulder this from this position, I'm a bit high up. But the magazine is going to add height to this, and the aiming system will be on top of that. So that'll actually give me a good viewpoint. If I were making this without the intention of putting a magazine on, I would get a different one of these, one that had screw holes. Some of them have a screw hole, one on the top, one on the bottom. They're just all plastic, and those are really cheap. And then just using the top screw hole, I could screw it on in this form, so that would actually raise the weapon up relative to my face, and I would get a better aim point. But because I'm putting the magazine on, I want my aim point to be a little bit higher. And so that's why I'm using this particular butt plate. But what I'm going to do now, and we'll come back to it in a bit, I'm just going to saw that piece of wood off and drill these holes and put the hole into my cocking lever. And then we'll come back and we'll see how it all assembles. Stay tuned. So I've done the drilling, and the hole that is going through was made with a 6mm drill bit. I will make a correction, because before I said from the end you going in 2 centimeters, which would have been 20mm. That was incorrect. It's actually the center point for this hole from the end is 16mm, not 20, 16mm, which is 3/4 of an inch. Now, on the crossbow itself, we made a little hole here, which you can see, and that lines up with these. So once this hole was drilled on the tube, a center punch was used to mark either side, and then the hole through the charging handle was made. Now, this charging handle will still work in the ordinary way, no problem. But because there is now this hole, if I just demonstrate, if we take a 6mm bolt, an M6 bolt, and push that through, and we'll just need to align everything correctly. It does want to get the alignment just so. There we go. So once that's through, we can take this wing nut, tighten it up, and this is our stock extender. Now, the wood has been sawed flush, and as you can see, I put a pilot hole here. I'm still going to have to, now I've painted that black on where it was metallic, and this will be screwed onto the back like so. But before I do that, we want to actually take this brushed steel and make it black. And the way I'm going to do that, take this off first, is with a very large piece of a wide diameter heat shrink tube. So this is like the sort of heat shrink tube you would use for wiring. This is much bigger. It's a lot bigger than this, but it will shrink down and actually give a sort of plastic outer surface to this. So that's next. So I'm putting our tube into the heat shrink, and we're now going to use a hot gun on it. Take a moment to warm up. Now, one thing I will mention about this particular heat shrink tube that I've used is this has an adhesive glue on the inside. So once this cools down, it's not just shrunk onto it, it's actually glued onto it. Now, right now this is too hot to handle, so I'm going to leave that to cool for a few minutes, and then we'll trim off the end. Having given this a couple of minutes to cool, it's still warm to the touch, but it's safe to handle now. We're going to trim off these bits of excess off the ends, just using a Swiss Army knife. And this is actually, it's quite stiff. It's very, very hard now. That's the excess off the one end, and now we'll take the excess off the other end. And just work our way around. And there we go. And you can actually see tiny bits of the glue that were under the rubber. So just trying to peel that excess off. What I will say is that this, even should it get slightly damaged or torn, will still stick to this really nicely. It's just basically a really nice sort of plastic feel to it. It's given it a good solid coating, and unlike paint, we don't have to worry about it chipping off. So I've got my opening here. I will say the two holes that go through obviously have been covered over by this, so we're also going to have to very carefully remove the excess plastic from those holes. That's not too difficult. I've freed up the one. Now we'll just do the other side. And for this, I'm using the small blade on the Swiss Army knife. Probably the single most useful utility tool there is. But that's another video, which some of you have seen. I'll put a link in the description for those of you who are interested, if you haven't seen that video yet. And there we go. So the two holes are back. And the next thing I'm going to do is reattach this extension rod to the end of the stock. One of the reasons why I've gone for this, aside from the fact that this could be done with ordinary household tools, is the fact that I did want the stock to be removable. After all, this might be something you would consider putting into something like a bug-out bag. And a bug-out bag is going to have a limited amount of space available. And that being the case, there. That being the case, taking the stock off to shorten the overall length of the weapon so that it will nicely fit into a bug-out bag might be important. With this on here, again, you can cock it from this, no problem. Nice and sturdy, but it is removable. It'll only take half a minute to remove it, half a minute to put it back on at most. Back here, we're going to take this butt plate and a long wood screw. And because I made a pilot hole, that's a bit simple. I'm going to cheat now. I'm just going to use the electric screwdriver. Before I get to final tightness, I'm just going to line this up so it is the correct orientation. And there we go. Now again, this particular buttstock was selected because I wanted it to fit into the middle, which makes my aim of point a little bit higher unless I cock my head down low. Now I can temporarily do that. What I will say is I'm going to be putting the magazine on, and that's going to raise the aim point. So I wanted this to take that into account. But a butt plate which would screw in from the top, so it would be more of an L shape, would be what you would use if you were not going to be placing the magazine on this. However, I am. In fact, that's going to be our next episode. So with this on it, again, it's no particular trick to cock it because I can grab from actually a little bit lower, which in fact gives me better leverage, and I can still reach this latch with my thumb. So reaching across, I press the latch. I now have more leverage, so I can cock even more quickly. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If you want to have a go at something like that, I think you'll find it's a lot easier than you might have imagined in order to put a stock onto this particular weapon. Next episode, we're going to be attaching the magazine. And that's going to be a game changer because that's going to make this weapon semi-automatic and super fast to load and fire. Again, have a look in the description if you haven't already for my link to my video on self-defense, the use of force, and the rules of engagement, because if you are considering making one of these and have anything like a self-defense concept in your mind, you really do need to familiarize yourself with the legal implications. and I discussed that in that video. Beyond that, I hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't already subscribed and you want to see the next episode where we attach the magazine, I recommend strongly that you do subscribe and click the bell icon so that you'll be notified when that video drops next week. I look forward to seeing you then. Have a good one.